All right, like always with Digi-Egg cards, let's start off with 4 copies of Digimon. Yes, I am running the black base. There's actually another option that you can run the red base as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But Digimon is one of my favorite ones just because at the start of main phase, you can always grab a source back and you can gain a memory, and it helps you give more plays potential, and you can actually recycle the cards and use their sort of sliding effects again and again, which is really, really important. And I'll show you guys exactly how to do it and work with it in the combos later on. But now that we talked about our egg, let's talk about our rookies. Since we're playing black base, let's start off with the black rookies, where we have the 4 copies of the brand new ALittleSpoon. This one can tuck underneath to give extra 2000 DP lasting to the end of your opponent's next turn. And by doing that, you can beef up your stack, and it can also draw you cards when you put something underneath it. Its inheritable also gives an extra 2000 DP during the opponent's turn, so you can beef it up even more once you slide it underneath. And this is your main guy that you always want to be digi-evolving into. Otherwise, if you're sliding stuff underneath in the early game, to continue the cycle and get more cards as you go gather your pieces. Speaking of gathering pieces, we're still running the 4 copies of the good old BT3 ALittleSpoon, just incredibly good to help you surge going through the top 5 cards of your deck, grabbing 2 hits, potentially a RagnaLoord and a Legend Arms, which you can be very effective grabbing almost anything that you need to help gather your pieces as you go through your stack. And because we also have the BT3 Zubamon, which I'm playing 1 copy of, this one you can't really digivolve on top of the egg, but we're using it exactly for the same reason, because it does exactly the same thing as that ALittleSpoon, which we saw earlier, to grab more pieces. To round off for all of our rookies, I'm playing 4 copies of the brand new Spadamon. This is mainly that it has that on-play effect where you get to trash a Legend Arm trait card to draw 2 cards. Otherwise, it has that handmaiden effect where you can slide it underneath your stack to draw a card. Then it has a when attacking effect that you can delete your opponent's 3000 DP or lower. Really great for getting rid of floodgates for the inheritable when you put it into your stack too. And speaking of which, if you guys want to see early deck lists before everyone else, first drafts and updated versions of every single deck that I cover on the channel, and even some that we don't even get to see for videos, definitely join the AVAULT Club, and I appreciate the support from all of you. That's it for our level 3s. Let's talk about our level 4s. Let's start with the red one this time, where we got 4 copies of Digi-Eggs, which basically lets you add extra 4000 DP by sliding it in until for the turn. Its second effect is when you slide something underneath it, you get to gain raid and piercing for the turn as well. Afterwards, it's inheritable. During your turn, you get extra 2000 DP, which is kind of like the reverse of the black cards which we've seen so far. Then we also have 4 copies of ALittleSpoon. By paying 1 memory just like Digi-Eggs, you slide it underneath your stack to give it extra 2000 DP instead of 4000. However, it lasts until the end of your opponent's turn, just like the ALittleSpoon which we talked about earlier. Otherwise, if you slide something underneath this particular Digimon, you get to gain blocker and reboot until the end of opponent's turn. And then inheritable, you always constantly gain extra 2000 DP during the opponent's turn to ensure your stack is strong and beefy for defenses. Then I'm still running 2 copies of the older tier ALittleSpoon. With its on-play effect, you get to slide it right underneath another Digimon to give it reboot until the end of opponent's turn, which you rarely do because 5 memory is a lot to kind of pay. Otherwise, you're really just mainly trying to Digivolve this into your stack to utilize its inheritable to gain blocker. That's it for all of our level 4s. Let's talk about our level 5s. Again, starting with the red, we got 4 copies of Duramon right here. Just like all the other new EX6 Legend Arm cards that we've seen so far, you get to pay memory from your hand to slide it underneath. But for the level 5s, you're gonna have to pay 2 memory to slide it underneath your Digimon instead of the 3 and 4s, whereas you pay 1. However, by placing it underneath it, you get to gain security +1 for the turn. And if this Digimon has something added underneath it, you also gain raid and piercing just like Digi-Eggs. And then its inheritable lets you trash the opponent's top card of their security whenever any attack target is switched. And this happens quite often for this deck because we always focus on raiding. Then we got 4 copies of ALittleSpoon here, which also by paying 2 memory costs, this is a very important enabler to get into your Blast DNA Ace combos, because by paying 2 memory, you get to force your opponent to attack and place it underneath your stack. Otherwise, it has the other effect where it gains reboot and blocker when you place something underneath it, and then its inheritable provides you protection against any deletion other than by your own effects, as long as you can trash any Legend Arms trait from your Digivolution sources. That's it for all our level 5s. Now let's talk about our level 6s and where we have the Randomon. And just like all the other Legend Arm cards which we've seen, we also get to slide it underneath our stack. Instead of paying 2 or 1 memory, level 6s you're gonna have to pay 3. With the Randomon, by sliding it underneath, you can delete your opponent's Digimon that has equal or lower DP than the stack that you slide it underneath. Itself has raid and piercing by default, and when Digivolving, it also lets you attack, which is kind of like blitz. Then it has the inheritable, which gives you piercing, and during your turn, while this Digimon is RagnaLoardmon, you're negating all your opponent's security effects that it checks. Then we got 4 copies of RagnaLoardmon here, the new one. By paying 3 memory, you can de-digivolve one across your opponent's entire board with it. You can blocker, reboot as well, and when Digivolving, it basically gives one of your Digimon immunity for an entire turn until the end of the opponent's turn. Otherwise, its inheritable also gives blocker, and opponent's turn also gives you protection where it can't leave the battle area except by your own effects. And this is incredibly good at keeping your stack protected on the board at all times and making it difficult for your opponents to remove them. Then I'm also running just 1 copy of the older RagnaLoardmon right here, which also gives you a bit of protection from deletion and returning to hand or deck effects. Also, when Digivolving, you can search the top 3 cards of your deck to grab some pieces, and with its inheritable, basically negates any Digimon effect against your RagnaLoardmon from your opponent. That's it for all of our level 6s. Now it's time to talk about level 7s, where we have 3 copies of RagnaLoardmon Ace. RagnaLoardmon Ace introduces the brand new Blast DNA mechanic, where it's also a hand counter, very similar to the regular Ace cards which you mostly see. But instead of just DNA with any level red or black, when you blast counter DNA, all you really need is a Durandamon in the battle area and then a RagnaLoardmon in your hand, or vice versa, and you get into either or to get into it and they can disrupt your opponents. Itself has raid, reboot, it has on play when Digivolving, you get to trash the top card of your opponent's security stack, and then afterwards you gain immunity until the end of the opponent's turn entirely. Also, if you DNA Digivolve, you get to de-Digivolve one across your entire opponent's board and delete a Digimon after that as well. Of course, it has Ace Overflow -5, but when you get into this card with a stack of ton of inheritables, your RagnaLoardmon Ace is almost just indestructible, can't be defeated, and it's just incredibly strong, and that 1 stack is all you need to ensure your game win conditions. Then speaking of RagnaLoardmon, I'm still playing 2 copies of the older one just because I felt like it's just super memory efficient. You can always Digivolve it for effectively for free. You can always tuck in a Durandamon, RagnaLoardmon to gain the memory back. Itself has security +1 and reboot as well. And it synergizes with a lot of your inheritables, which is always really nice because this one is always a great one to sort of like Digivolve up all the way to your stack if you don't have access to the combo pieces to go for the Blast DNA combos at some times. That's it for all of our Digimon. Let's talk about Tamers. I'm playing 3 copies of Tide, which is our main memory setter, which also gives us extra DP buffs when we redirect attacks. We can also spend it to draw a card as well at the same time, which is this deck really needs. Being able to start our turn with 3 memory is incredibly crucial with this deck because there's not a lot of boosts and sort of memory gaining effects aside from Kakenmon. But when you synergize both together, you're almost starting your turn at 4 memory every time. So then you can actually combo off and really manipulate the memory gauge to your favor and go for some really big combo plays and flexibility. That's it for our Tamers. Now let's talk about options. I'm just running 1 copy of the brand new one, which is the Mythical Arm Salvation. It's nice that you can finally utilize this card as long as you have a Legend Arm trait, so that you don't have to fulfill the both color requirements. Being able to tuck something in back from trash is kind of nice. You can actually kind of spicily tuck in RagnaLoardmon Ace because it has an on-play effect as well. Its delay effect is just fantastic because when any of your Digimon will leave the battle area, just trash this card and you can play any Legend Arm trait Digimon within that Digimon's sources back out for free. And this is where you can actually spit out a RagnaLord Ace for free and synergize together with the on-play effect as well. And then last but not least, because the meta is really focusing on a lot of playing Digimon by effects and going wide as well, Crimson Blaze is always really nice because we all have red sources and mostly our Digimon as we climb up are going to be red. So we're going to want to utilize this to sort of like board wipe the opponents when they try to go wide. All right, tech cards. Let's talk about other stuff we can be playing. Of course, there is the red source where it is Sakudomon, where when an effect places a card with Legend Arms and its traits into the sources, you get to gain a memory. It is also equally just as good because whenever you put something in, you're basically putting it for free once per turn. But I still like Kakenmon a little bit more just because you can always return a source back, so it gives you the versatility to give you option whether if you want to use it again or Digivolve in the back or build your stack differently that way. But it really comes down to your personal preference and playstyle on which base you want to run as well. Of course, there's the new Zubamon, which I'm currently not running just because I'm trying to focus a lot on searching and consistency for the deck, but this one can give you extra 4000 DP. Playing as a one-off is kind of nice so that you can gain a little more power. Just like the other Ludomon you saw, when you put something underneath, you get to draw one in the early stage of the game, and then also gives you extra 2000 DP during your turn, which pretty much fulfills exactly the same thing as what Zuba Eagomon does already. Speaking of other spicy options we could be running is we can play Laplace's Demon. or Trident Arm, which are really great alternatives to force your opponent's Digimon to attack into us so then we can blast DNA. Aside from relying on RagnaLoardmon, these are some really great cards to basically enable that kind of combo so they can disrupt your opponents out of nowhere, and it's also a really good security bomb when you're playing Trident Arm as well because you can de-digivolve 3 on your opponent's Digimon too. And then last but not least, if you want to play some boost options, I would only really recommend Black Memory Boost. The reason why you would only play Black Memory Boost is because we're playing Black Base, but if you're playing Red Base, you can play Red Memory Boost, and being able to search a little bit deeper is a little bit important. Just because the entire deck has both colors red and black, you want to increase the effectiveness and chances are searching. If you play stuff like training, you might not really be able to get your hits consistently. Therefore, this is what I recommend if you want searching and memory gain. Alright, combos and how to play the RagnaLoardmon deck. With the opening hand, you definitely want to see your rookies, ideally the ones that can search and grab you pieces in the early stages of the game, and of course as well as your Ludamon, so you can digivolve in the back as much as possible. These are the ones I would prioritize to sort of hard play if I can, but this is one of the best reasons why we run the Kakenmon, because sometimes you might not see the optimal pieces that you kind of need, because as you sort of go up the line, you want to find your level 4s and your level 5s, and then so on with your level 6s as well, and then eventually into your level 7, which is your RagnaLoardmon as you keep going. This deck doesn't really have a lot of sort of boosting, gaining memory, search power, because all of it is actually built within the actual core mechanic of all the cards in itself. So of course, Spadamon to draw cards, and then usually I would, if I have the two choices of the Ludamon, you can digivolve into this one ideally, but sometimes you may not have the choice to sort of go into this one, so you have to digivolve into the other one, which is not as bad, although you might be thinking you're forgoing the ability to sort of go for the on-play digivolve, but as long as you're digivolving on top of it into a level 4, you can kind of utilize the Kakemon Star main phase effect to recycle your pieces, and this is exactly how you do it. You push it out, and at the starter main, you will just actually return this level 3 to your hand immediately, and you actually have the choice to immediately hard play it and search and dig through 5 cards on top of your deck, which is really great value. Aside from that, even though sometimes when you're digivolving up the stack, ideally you like to sort of sit there as a level 5, and the ideal level 5 you really want to go into is Duramon, and not as much as RagnaLoardmon, because it is a piece that you want to keep and utilize its hand main effect instead. There's a lot of memory manipulation that you need to control with this deck, because there's a lot of effects that cost 1 memory, 2 memory, and 3 memory as long as you're building up into your stack. Remember, all your level 3s and 4s have effects that can pay 1 memory to tuck underneath. Your level 5s have 2 memory costs to tuck underneath, and so on with your 6s and 3 costs. And you want to play around that memory gauge, and which is also why it's really important, if you see a tie in the early stages, you want to establish it as soon as possible. Being able to start your turn at 3 memory, you can effectively start playing at 4 alongside with Kakenmon effect. So let's quickly show you guys what the main sort of core combo really looks like with RagnaLoardmon and Duramon here. So when you push out, like I mentioned, return a source so you can go to 4 memory. And by going to 4 memory, you can immediately digivolve into any of your level 6, either Durandamon or Brilujamon. Durandamon is great so that you can raid into the opponent's security and do some damage, and when you raid, you also get to trash the security at the same time, so giving you a lot of attack power when you need to. Otherwise, if you go into Briludra, which gives you sort of the protection and you can last long with a blocker to play defensively at the same time. Now, one of the reasons that it's really crucial that you sit on a level 6 on the battle area as soon as possible, because by doing that, you establish the board presence and control that you have the potential threat that you can blast DNA against your opponents if they ever attempt to attack. Even though you may not have all the pieces in your hand immediately at this moment, but it's always important to play it as if you do, because this can make your opponent play around and slow them down and forces them to go through different kind of plays before just going straight aggro into you without thinking twice. Now, in the situations that you do have it and you're ready to go, this is where you want to have RagnaLoardmon in your hand. And one of the conditions is, other than to have it in your hand, you do need your full line pieces of the other 2 in your hand as well, and your opponent needs to have a Digimon on a board, because by tucking in RagnaLoardmon for 2 memory, you basically taunt them and they have to start to attack you at the start of main phase immediately. And by doing so, this feeds right into a free blast DNA Digivolve into your RagnaLoardmon with Durandamon. And going into here immediately, you get to trash the top card of your opponent's security stack, and you become immune for the entire turn, which is really great. And afterwards, because you DNA Digivolve, you also de-Digivolve 1 across your opponent's entire board and delete a Digimon. If they have a wide board or at least 2 bodies, then that's really great value, because you delete the Digimon, And then you can also block the attack because RagnaLoardmon gives it blocker. And once you establish this enormous stack on the board, you have piercing, you have negation on security effects, you have protection other than by your own effects, you have trashing security, extra DP buffs, and also another second layer of protection when it has any sort of deletion. And as well as having tie, whenever you're raiding or blocking, you get to pump it up by an extra 2k, and drawing cards is incredibly crucial. So once you establish this first stack on the board, really priority-wise, the main combo is because of RagnaLoardmon. So at the start of your main phase with your Kakemon, it's always nice to return this one back to your hand so they can use the taunt again as you're sort of digivolving and building into your second stack. And as you're going up again, you repeat the same combo as the main line of play. That's really how you want to go for RagnaLoardmon, and you continue to raid, attack, reboot, blocker, and stand, and sort of try to put your resources into this one single stack as much as possible. Don't forget, you can always utilize other effects such as the ALittleSpoon. Place it underneath by paying 1 memory, extra 2k until the end of your opponent's turn. Also, you get another 2k bonus from the inheritable if you're trying to play around DP buffs. If you need to attack more heavily, that's when you would sort of try to put more Digi-Eggs underneath once again. By recycling these sources back to back with Kakemon, you can utilize their hand main effects over and over again so that you're always keeping a consistent cycle of your combo pieces. Now, in another situation that sometimes you may not see your entire pieces and line and whatnot, you might just regularly go into a regular stack that looks just like this. This is where the old RagnaLoardmon comes in handy. By going into this by paying 3 memory costs just to digivolve until 6, you can tuck in a Durandamon underneath or another RagnaLoardmon the same. As long as you tuck in one of the other, you get to gain the 3 memory back, effectively making a free Digivolution into a level 7. And then afterwards, this RagnaLoardmon has fantastic stacks as well. It can security +1, reboot, it has the blocker, everything in the inheritable, so you can start attacking and unsuspend by rebooting, and then you can have a strong standing blocker. And the nice thing is that there's no ace overflow in this stack as well. So this is some really cool things, so you still kind of play with the older version as well at the same time. Now, in some situations, you might actually get access to Mythical Arm Salvation, and this is really good because then you can put anything you want from trash underneath it. You can even put a RagnaLoardmon ace underneath your RagnaLoardmon, because when it will leave the battle area, you basically just pop the delay and your stack would be gone, and you get to play this RagnaLoardmon ace, and you get to utilize this on-play effect all over again to trash your opponent's security and gain immunity for the turn, just like that. And even playing RagnaLoardmon like that, you can also then rebuild the whole stack turn after turn by paying the memory to tuck stuff underneath like this. Pay 1 memory at a time and really utilize and think about the memory cost you can sort of manipulate and play around. Because if you want to give your opponents as little memory as possible, then you want to utilize these effects to choke against your opponent. If your opponent is if you're currently at 0 memory and you want to pass your opponent to 1, then you simply just put a Digi-Eggs or anything that's level 4 below by paying that 1 memory. If you're at 1 memory and you want to put them back to 1 as well again, then you tuck anything that is a level 5 underneath it, which would pass them back to 1 memory as well. If you're at 2 memory, vice versa, exactly the same again. Tuck in the level 6 to pass them back to 1. So that's how you really want to be playing this deck ideally as you're building your stack. There's sort of 2 ways to go about it, and there's a lot of ways that you want to continue to control the board, delete their stuff, raid, change directions into their security, trash as well, all at the same time to continue to beat your opponent down bit by bit with the massive strong RagnaLoardmon ace. Once again, make sure to get your very own Spacetime Angel playmat on the AVAULT store right now. If you want to see the gameplay and combos and all this in action, watch this gameplay video as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you in the next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.